I'm turned on. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thanks for being here. It is Tuesday, September 19th, and this is the Port of Bellingham Board of Commissioners meeting. I'm going to remind folks there are a couple ways to participate. Thank you all for who are participating by being here in person. It's nice to see you. We are also live streaming our meeting on Zoom and YouTube. I'm going to open the public meeting and start with roll call. Commissioner Briscoe? Here. Commissioner Bell?
Here.
Commissioner Shepard is also here. All three commissioners are present. Our first order of business is public comment. We asked to keep public comment to 3 minutes. The way we have public comment work, you're welcome to use the full 3 minutes. Carrie keeps track of the time. The commission may or may not ask follow-up questions or provide a response. We may also address the issue at the end of our meeting as we see fit. And we do appreciate you taking the time to be here and provide public comment. I have 2 people signed up. The first is Riley Sweeney. You can come up, just state your name, and provide your comment.
Good evening. My name is Riley Sweeney, Community Relations Manager for ABC Recycling, 735 Cornwall Avenue. Back in 1861, the burgeoning community of Bellingham, Whatcom, Seaholm, and Fairhaven banded together to create Colony Wharf, the first commercial dock in Bellingham Bay. Within a year, ships were loading up Bellingham timber, mostly Douglas fir and cedars, and taking them up to British Columbia, where they built houses and businesses, making it some of the first maritime trade that happened in our community. Ships coming in and out of the bay provided the economic engine for Whatcom County for the next 150 years, driving innovation, investment, and most importantly, putting food on the table for Bellingham residents. Today, we continue that tradition at the Bellingham Shipping Terminal. As I speak, 60 ILWU workers are preparing to load the Autumn Sea, a merchant vessel with 27,000 metric tons of depolluted iron and steel. The material has been diverted from landfills and will live on in a new life as sheet metal, I-beams, and rebar. This work is essential to providing the materials our community needs to meet the growing challenge of the climate crisis. Producing new steel from recycled content requires 60% less energy and produces 58% less carbon emissions. That said, we understand not everybody is as excited about loading our ship as we are. Based on feedback from meetings with Bellingham City Council members, we've modified our operations a little bit. We've increased the size of our sound wall, and we'll continue to work to reduce the impacts on the neighboring communities that live next to our industrial working waterfront. This is the 4th ship we've loaded in Bellingham, but it will not be our last. ABC Recycling is in it for the long haul. We have invested in Bellingham because Bellingham is a great place to do business. We have a skilled workforce and a community that cares about saving the planet. So, just as those first ships carrying Douglas firs up to Canada created jobs and commerce for our community, so our work this week provides for the next generation of Bellingham residents. Again, my name is Riley Sweeney, and if you have questions about ABC Recycling and their operations, feel free to reach out. Our contact information is at abcrecycling.com. Thank you.
Do we have information on our site?
Do we have information about how to contact ABC on our terminals page? I don't know that we do. I don't know if we typically provide that type of contact information, but we can certainly look into that if that's appropriate. Okay. Yeah.
I can see your background in theater. It showed at the mic. I just wanted you to know that I knew that.
Okay, thank you very much. The next person I have is Ty King.
I'm definitely not as good a speaker as he is.
Animated.
Yeah, I'm just here with everything going on. You know, we've got recycling going. And like you mentioned, it's great. It puts industrial jobs in the town. It brings a lot of money in. And I know some people are upset about the noise. It just seems kind of odd to me, though, that, like you said, this is the 4th ship. So that's 4 weeks worth of work, and People are complaining about that. The small amount of noise that it does produce creates a huge effect on the county and the city. A lot of money coming in, decent living wage jobs for the men and women that work, which allows us to put more money into the community. Lots comes out of our paychecks. Good chunks of that support Medicare and Social Security. So we are giving back to the city and the community. I just wanted to say it's crazy to me that some people have complained, although they've moved above an industrial area, which was there, and it's fairly large. And there's another seaport right down the road here in Fairhaven. There's also a beautiful view overlooking a sewage plant in Fairhaven. I mean, this is all research that should have been done before someone moved in somewhere. And I understand people like to retire and move here. A little more research, they could have found there are many beautiful retirement homes in Whatcom County. And with enough research that some of the plans even come with free meals. It would have been great. They're not near industrial zones. Everybody would have been happier. So just with that being said, it's nice to know that there's work in this county again and living wage jobs that help support families. And once again, a little bit of noise is not worth all these jobs with the advantages they create, and they allow people to raise their children. And like I said, I'm no speaker. I'm up here mumbling and not very eloquent. So anyway, that was all I wanted to say. That and still, I'm sure there's vacancies in some of those retirement homes, and they'd probably love to have more residents and free meals. Don't forget the free meals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. King. Is there anyone else in the room who wishes to provide public comment? Hi there.
Hi, good evening, Commissioners. My name's Alex McLean. I live in Happy Valley. I've met a couple of you through my neighborhood work and activism work over the years. I'm actually here tonight to comment about the climate plan that you guys are working on, but I want to briefly comment on the ABC kerfuffle that's going on. I found it interesting. I think it was yesterday, former Commissioner McCauley had a post on social media that said something to the effect of gentrification destroys working waterfronts. And the cognitive whiplash for me was he's actually one of the commissioners that approved the Harcourt development that's putting, luxury condos directly atop former industrial facilities. So you've got this dynamic where you've actively created a place where you want people to buzz around on e-bikes and, a laptop in one hand and a latte in the other, and, have this energized waterfront, but with industrial uses. And as you can probably tell from my shirt, that's what we want. We wanted to save the granary, and we wanted to have that dynamic. Anyway, I just think it's interesting. I think a much better alternative, instead of just shipping scrap, would be to repurpose the Intalco aluminum site and get 700 jobs up there and re-smelter the stuff, so you're actually exporting and producing functional goods rather than just being a retailer for scrap. And I don't think any of my union friends would have any disagreement with that. So I hope somebody's looking into that. I'm here for the climate plan. Thank you guys for taking that step. Despite my short hair, I'm actually a pretty rabid hippie, and most of the stuff that I do in town is directly related to planting trees. So I hope that in this plan, I tried to scour through it. It's 80 plus pages. I'd really love to see more emphasis on planting trees as part of your, the methodology or whatever action plans you guys have. They're simple, they're cheap, they devour carbon, they cool cities down, they help with water. These are all really basic things that everybody knows. It's like boilerplate for hippiedom. Plant trees and they do the work for you. So instead of like investing in really expensive widgets and technology, you can get seedlings for $1 a piece. And I observed, you can look at a satellite photo of your holdings. A lot of your properties are dead level with 0 trees. And that's kind of inexcusable in 2023. I personally have planted over 300 trees since COVID. I kind of freaked out and just went nuts. It's easy, it's cheap, and it's a solution. So I hope you guys look into it. And again, I really appreciate that you bothered to take that step. And it sounded like it's a pretty rare thing for a port to actually have a climate plan. So thank you.
Excuse me, couple things for you. As far as ex-Commissioner McCauley, he wasn't in office when all this was discussed between the city and the port for what was gonna go on over here?
As far as ABC, yeah.
No, as far as the Harcourt stuff, that was before his time as a commissioner. It was just before he was a commissioner, and the things were agreed to prior to his. Secondly, as far as Alcoa, before Alcoa was closed, the port worked very hard to try and keep it open. You should direct some comments to Bonneville Power Association, because they're the ones that put the nix on the whole program out there in the last round of negotiations between state officials, federal officials, and the power company, and the people that wanted to reopen that plant there.
Yeah.
So the port was on top of that. We did try to push that ahead and continue that operation out there. We'd like to see those jobs back. So we weren't sitting on our hands. We were active the whole process through that, as well as before they actually closed the plant down, trying to keep it open.
Yeah.
Just so you know that.
Well, two fast rebuttals. China has 140 plus aluminum smelters. Right now, America has 3.
I'm very well
We
aware of
have
that.
been liquidating our industrial base for decades. And to me, just dynamically, as far as the efficiency of shipping chunks of steel or aluminum around, the absurdity of having every single recycled Budweiser can going to either Louisiana or China, rather than up to what I presume is $1 billion functional smelter that's 15 miles away. I just find that mind-blowing.
We're in agreement on that.
Yeah, so hopefully we can do something a little more proactive. And I sat down with Macaulay as far as I wanted to work at the granary, and I ended up I did become the first employee for Harcourt there. So he knew what the plan was.
Well, no, we all knew it.
Whether or not he signed the actual agreement. So yeah, thank you again.
Thank you very much, Alex. Appreciate it. Anything else? Anybody else in the room before we move on to folks on Zoom? Okay. Anybody on Zoom wish to provide public comment? You can unmute yourself and.
There's a gentleman named
All right. Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Shepard and the other commissioners. My name is Andrew Shelton. I am a retired commercial fisher, including one unfortunate season in the Bering Sea. I was aghast to see that the king and snow crab fleets didn't get to fish this past winter due to the biologists shutting them down. They had 2 massive heat waves the 2 previous years that changed where the snow crab laid their eggs. Climate change is starting to kick our ass. And I know that a lot of the port's customers are commercial fishers. Those are my old tribe. And I work with guys that died. The boat I used to work on sank, running from Kodiak out to the crowd grounds. And the fact that we're dragging our feet on climate change, which is threatening the entire commercial fishing industry's livelihood, is pretty disturbing. I want to ask all the commissioners to vote for the climate action strategy. It's fantastic work. It doesn't go near far enough, but it's a good start. And the good thing about climate change, it's a math problem. Like if we reduce emissions here, then the fossil fuel powered fleet can continue to fish and harvest seafood, which you all need. So yeah, thank you guys for your work, and I encourage you. I hope it's a unanimous yes vote on the climate action strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Anybody else on Zoom? Is there anything in that chat?
Rob is logged in, so he'll have to check the chat.
Oh. Our executive director is on Zoom. He is at a conference right now. Rob, if you're able to check anything else in that chat for us.
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't think I logged in. I thought I came as a guest. There's just Andrew in the chat that wanted to talk.
Okay. Sounds like that's all the public comment. We will have another public comment opportunity after the end of our regularly scheduled business. All right. Well, I'm going to read our advisory committee meeting schedule. We have 2 advisory committee meetings. The Marina Advisory Committee, or the MAC, their next meeting is October 10th at 6 p.m., and that happens here in the Harbor Center building. We have one final meeting for 2023 for the BIAC, or the Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee, and that will be on October 12th at 4 p.m. Not quite ready for last meetings of 2023. That is hard for my brain to get wrapped around, but I guess that is what's happening. That meeting is on Zoom and in person. Okay, our next item is our consent agenda. Carrie, if you please.
Motion to approve consent agenda items A through Q.
Any questions or comments? Commissioner Briscoe?
I have none.
Commissioner Bell?
I just want to say thank you to Brian and to Greg and to Terry and Matt, everybody else who responded to my questions last night. I was in a mood. I read things and wanted some answers right away. So you guys pulled a rabbit out of a hat. So I'm very comfortable with this consent agenda now. Thank you very much.
Okay. Very good.
Motion to approve consent agenda items A through Q.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yes.
Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
And Commissioner Shepard's a yes as well. Carries 3-0. Our first and only presentation is on long-term leases, and we have our real estate director, Elliott Smith.
Hi, good evening. I'm Elliott Smith. I'm the real estate director here at the port. And we had a request some weeks ago from the commissioners to have a sort of brief presentation on the length and type of leases that we have amongst our tenants. And those would be tenants at our marinas, at our industrial parks, at Fairhaven, the shipping terminal, also at the airport, and several other places around the county. It's over 300 tenants, so it's quite a wide range. But there are a number of those that have longer-term leases. If someone could guide me how to... That's what I'm looking for. Thank you very much. So we have quite a few long-term leases. So out of the more than 300 leases registered with the port right now, there are around 50 that I would categorize as longer-term leases. 19 of those are between 75 and 80 years in length, and that includes the original term of the lease. For example, it might have been 40 years, plus any extension options that were added to that. From that, you can figure the number of years that the port has committed our property. So it is amongst the port's duties and responsibilities to be good stewards of the land that we run for the port. And part of that is making sure that there are jobs, economic development, and good good work happening around our community. A number of the leases, about 15 of them are between 50 and 70 years in length, and around 18 of them between 30 and 45 years in length. And if I just walk you clockwise around this picture, these buildings at the airport, here on Roeder, out at the hotel at the airport, Holiday Inn Express, on the Bellwether Peninsula, these are buildings that would not have been built without the aid of long-term leases. And I'll go into that a little bit longer. But in this picture alone, in today's costs, you're looking probably a couple $100 million of investment, perhaps more, that the port did not have to put up in capital. Our contribution is the land, and the port makes its money by leasing that land long-term to the parties that actually invest in the building. So just to give you a few examples, long-term leases and business names that are known as part of the port community. For maritime long-term leases, Bellingham Cold Storage, Starfish and Moon Enterprises up in Blaine, landings at Colony Wharf, which was mentioned earlier today by one of our guests as a very long-term business name here. Bornstein Seafood. Those are all holders of long-term leases with the port. They have obligations to use that land as prescribed in their lease. And we have obligations to make sure that land is usable and maintain its environmental integrity, et cetera. At the airport, there are a number of enterprises. Woodstone, commercial oven manufacturer that's been doing great business out there for a while. Yamato, engine parts manufacturer and distributor. The new FedEx facility that was built out there some years ago. And most recently, the Alpha hangars, beautiful new hangars for those of you who haven't seen them. Those happen on the back of long-term leases. And I think driving around the loop at the airport, having a look at those, you'll see it has quite a good effect without burdening the taxpayers with additional taxes to build them. For hospitality, we have the Bellwether Hotel, which sits on a long-term land lease, the Holiday Inn Express at the airport, which sits on a long-term land lease, and more than a few restaurants. Anthony's is one I've got listed here, but all of those serve the community, provide quite a few jobs, and keep it vibrant down here at the waterfront. For offices, out here on Bellwether Peninsula, the credit union offices and the Cohanum office building and Cohanum apartment buildings off of Bellwether, those are built on land lease that was prepaid. So the cash went to the commission, or to the port early on. Yeah, you didn't get the check?
We're still waiting.
Checks in the mail, apparently.
Is that where Macaulay went?
And we were able to invest that earlier on. Interestingly, though, two of these buildings here are right here on Roeder. One is the Gaston Bay building and the Marina building that has LFS in the basement. Those were buildings that were badly in need of renovation. With the obligation to take on the land lease came the money to reconstruct those buildings. So the Gaston Bay building is actually quite a nice building tucked in by Mount Baker Plywood. They did a good job renovating a historic building, and again, on the back of a lease. Same with the Marina building, which has a number of offices above the LFS store. Excuse me. And the most recent category, and quite an interesting one, I think, is the land leases surrounding Corex's distributed energy project. Brian, help me with the correct name for their activities. But they will be supplying the energy for the apartments and hotels and businesses down around the working waterfront in a distributed energy system. We also earn some money back on the lease of the land that they're operating in. So it's an interesting new type of long-term lease, but obviously if you're laying infrastructure in the ground, yeah, you don't want to be digging it up after a 5-year lease. So, and then my last slide here, and then happy to answer any questions. Why do ports in general, not just the Port of Bellingham, employ long-term leases? Financial institutions that make the investment in these kind of properties, they want to make sure that they're going to be able to get their money back out, in addition to providing whatever service or factory or building that they're putting up. The long-term lease gives business owners and their banks or other financial backers the confidence to invest in buildings that we hope last 30, 40, 50 years in our port. And again, the port has stewardship over more land than we can pay to develop. Land leases allow for that economic development, jobs, and income to the port itself in order to work on other things like our environmental stewardship, the environmental action plan that you're seeing next. That having that income flowing in is kind of vital to keeping this a healthy community. And then the last reason is one more particular to our port. We have about a 0% vacancy in our real estate. If something particularly industrial comes free, it is gone immediately. We turn away businesses on a regular basis because we don't have factory buildings or warehouse buildings or workshops and laboratories for them to work out of. Long-term leases can help us to deliver those buildings without capital input from the port, or with very little capital input. And we want to make sure that we see land that's been sitting idle for a long time. I would use the Airport Industrial Park as a good example. We want to see that put to productive use and provide those jobs and income to the port. So with that little bit of editorial, I can answer any questions you have about long-term leases. I'm happy to get more statistical about it, but this is the general picture at this moment.
Thanks, Elliot. Questions, comments?
Yeah, since I really was the pee under your mattress on this one, some of you had that story read to you.
We'll just move on.
We'll call you Lentil from now on.
It's a different generation. It's okay. The real issue for me has never been the value of a long-term lease. It's been when you have a long-term lease and somebody wants to extend that lease mid-term for value created. And quite frankly, it's one thing if you've got a startup business that is going to put something new down that we haven't seen before versus an established, well-financed, cash-flowing business and extending a lease when there's still, 15, 20 years left on their existing lease. So my big issue has not been the value of a new lease where a hotel or even the board mill is going. It's when somebody comes in mid-term, which in my world it never happens, but it does happen at the port a lot, where somebody comes in mid-term and says, I want to extend my lease for another 15 years. We need to make sure that we're getting the right value for that we would be, say, on a new one. So that really has been my issue. It hasn't been a new lease for long-term. It's just how do we, when you've still got 15 years on a lease, you've got to have a pretty darn good reason to come in and want another 30 on the back of it. And you want to make sure that we provide enough value. And from the commission standpoint, I want to make sure we're consistent in how we evaluate extensions on leases for another 15, 20 years, or even 50 years, which we're being asked to do on a routine basis to make sure that the value is commensurate with what we would get if we did a long-term lease on a startup. I have no issue on a startup or an added value to a raw piece of land that would never be used. It's really the businesses that have cash flow, that are already existing, that seem to be taking advantage of the port at some level. So that's really the issue that I wanted to bring to light with this discussion.
Can I ask a question?
There was no question in that. There was
Yeah.
just a statement.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
What sort of thing would a business, a mature business, need to demonstrate to the commission in order to have the commission consider that kind of a mid-lease term
Well, I can't-
change?
I'm not going to speak for the commission, but I can speak for me. A new line of business, a new building or a new operation that enhances, that brings more employment. If it's just going to be the existing operation, it needs to show some value to have us, especially when you look at the not just the length of the term on the leases, it's the value, it's the rate we're charging. Some of these long-term leases have very, very low values, and they're not commensurate with market. So how do we get them up to market? Or if we're not going to get them up to market, is there a value commensurate with that request?
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
It did. I have margin notes.
I don't want the public's property. If somebody wants a longer lease, you know, we have to look at it really hard. Why do they want that longer lease? What's in it for the people of Whatcom County? And is this just an ask for a longer lease because we're going to retire in 5 years and we'll get more money because we can sell the lease? You know, as a commission, you have to prudently take care of the public's property. And that means you don't allow people to make money off the back of the people, personal gain off the back of the property that people own. The property is there to put people to work in Whatcom County and make businesses grow. It's not for self-gain. And that's where the commission has to make a decision when we're asked about extending a long-term lease that's already there. What's really behind this? Is this for personal gain, or does that particular business or tenant or whoever it may be have family coming behind them that they're trying to establish a business for another generation or two to move forward? So those are the things you're faced with as a commissioner, and that's why these questions get asked. It's, you know, every time someone asks for a lease, you have to dig and figure out exactly what's going on so that you do not mess up, so to speak, and let somebody prosper on the public's back. And that's our job.
And I'm going to add, some of these leases that were cut way back when were sweetheart leases with very low interest rates. Some of them 1% or in that range. We haven't seen 1% inflation for quite some time. And quite frankly, it hasn't kept up with market. So I've got a keen interest in making sure that if we're going to renew a lease, that we get it back to at least some level of reasonability, and that we have a current inflation rate put in there, or current, you know, CPI put in there, so that we're capturing inflation when it does happen. So, yeah, that was about as eloquent as I get. Yeah.
All right, well, I wanted to keep this brief. I hope my presentation addressed some of your concerns. That helps me a little bit gear towards the next renegotiations. Of course, some of these don't come free till 2060s or 2070s. I hope to be here to negotiate those.
Thank you very much, Elliot.
Thank you.
I won't be voting for those.
Okay, that's the end of our presentations for the day. We have one action item. Carrie, if you please.
Yeah, a motion to approve resolution number 1409 for the adoption of the Port of Bellingham Climate Action Strategy. Sustainability Program Manager Adrian Douglas Scott.
Just got rid of it. Carrie. I just closed the one that was open, and now I can't find it. Can I? Can I get to the folder? Yeah, thank you. It's in the folders. Thank you. It should be there as presentations. Ooh. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, hello. Nice to see you all, commissioners. My name is Adrienne Douglas Scott. I am the Sustainability Program Manager for the Port of Bellingham. The motion for you today is adoption of the 2023 Climate Action Strategy. You've seen this before a couple of times. Remember that this is a guidance document. It is aligned with other strategic goals and plans of the ports. It's a framework for port-wide project prioritization. It refers to a number of associated work, such as the vulnerability assessment and a greenhouse gas inventory and other work as well. This is really just a very small part of what the port is doing to both reduce our impact and ensure that our infrastructure is protected from the effects of climate change. So I want to emphasize there's a lot of work going on around this climate action strategy. So we've updated you several times since we started this work in 2019, including an update earlier this year. Subsequent to that update, we had a public input process, and the result of that was over 200 online comments. And those comments were for future iterations of the climate action strategy. Generally, those were focused on including tenant activities, as well as engaging tenants, including some consideration of housing for staff and for tenant staff as well, and looking at transportation and those emissions. Nothing has fundamentally changed with the climate action strategy since we brought it to you with the last update. So just as a reminder, there's 2 targets in the climate action strategy. The first is greenhouse gas emission reductions. So that target is to reduce the port-controlled emissions by at least 90% from the 2019 baseline year by 2030, and 100% from 2019 levels by 2050. The goals to meet this target are through energy supply and use in buildings and other infrastructure, starting with the port for now and supporting what's happening with the tenants for now. And then we look at the port fleet vehicles and equipment, as well as supporting tenant emission reduction from the fleet fuel used there, and looking at employee commuting for the port specifically. We're also monitoring our progress towards greenhouse gas reduction targets across both the port and tenants' emissions. So the resilience target is that we anticipate, prepare for, and effectively respond to the impacts of climate change and collaborate with regional partners to protect and enhance the economy, community, and the environment through port-wide resilience programming efforts. So the goals to meet this target and to help meet the vision for this work are to institutionalize and prioritize climate change resilience and adaptation across all port divisions, processes, investments, and operations, to increase the resilience of port infrastructure to changing climate conditions, to support a local economy that's built on sustainable practices and is also resilient to climate change impacts, and to protect and enhance the health of port staff, tenants, and the community. So, pending Commission approval and adoption, the outcomes of the climate action strategy are that it continues as a tool for prioritization of projects throughout the port. Those projects would be folded into our existing budgeting processes, just like any others would. It would go through the same evaluation process with the knowledge that it will help us meet our targets, or we expect it to as well. The climate action strategy work will help us meet our certifications. So we have Green Marine, we have EnviroSTARS, and we're looking at others as well. Collaboration with other jurisdictions is really key for this work. We're definitely not operating in a bubble unless you're talking about a global one. It positions the port as a leader among mid-sized ports for this type of work. And we're definitely finding other ports, both mid-size and large and small, are reaching out to us for advice on how to get started at their ports as well. We do find now that notices of funding opportunities are asking for evidence of climate action strategies, both on the federal and the state level. So those funding opportunities are looking at climate work to help score those applications. We believe this will help us continue to be a local economic driver, and we believe that the goals and targets are achievable and measurable. So with your direction, we'll keep implementing the strategy, which includes many projects and programs underway, such as our Building and Infrastructure Energy Management Program, various construction projects, including electric vehicle charging stations. We have a number of solar feasibility studies underway right now. I mentioned our environmental certifications. We've got electrification analysis going on, habitat enhancement, the greenhouse gas inventories, and more. So lots of work going on. We will continue to engage port staff through various projects, programs, and messaging. We're planning ahead for 2024 by feeding those projects into the budget process, as well as integrating the climate action strategy into the comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements in 2024, so it'll still be subject to annual review as well. So it's definitely a living document as we go forward. So I'd really like to thank you for your support of all this work thus far, and staff recommends approval of commission adoption for this motion.
Okay. Good presentation. Thank you, Adrian. Questions or comments? I'll start with you, Commissioner Briscoe.
So I guess, reality is 90% really achievable. And I think I've asked this question before because I can see the grin. And I know it's not, we'd like to think it is, but it really in all reality isn't. But this is a straw man, so to speak. And we're going to keep putting fingers on it, take feet off, put them back on. So I guess it's the language. When language goes into things, I hate to see benchmarks set like that. If we truly know in our heart that it's probably not achievable, we hope it is. But when you put that there and you don't get there, then there's a lot of scorn. And it's the scorn in the future. I won't be here as a commissioner probably by then. I'm pretty sure of that. But the future commission is going to take some scorn for a document that was written that says you're going to be here on this year and we're not there, and you're going to have to explain why. So I don't know. I don't know how you soften percentages in something like this, but those numbers are the things that usually bother me. I mean, it's great to shoot for the moon, but the reality is we're probably only going to get halfway there. I don't know. Is that reality? I don't know. So I think we're moving in the right direction. As I said before when we had this discussion about this, you have to start somewhere. I just hate to see numbers put in when you're starting somewhere that are a little bit higher than I think we can actually drive to or walk to or hike to. So other than that, I think you guys have done it, you and staff have done a great job, Adrian. It's a step in the right direction. Or maybe it's a leap in the right direction. I'm not sure how you want to put it. I just hate to see, and it's not just us, I just hate to see this country always putting numbers out that probably aren't realistic. Let's be more realistic about it, then maybe we can work harder to get past the number we put out instead of just thinking we might get to the number we put out. So, but it's all good stuff. I'll be voting for it. I think, like I said, we have to start somewhere, and I think it's a good start. And as long as it's a living document, a straw man, so to speak, that we can take apart, put back together. I don't want anything written in stone because this even portrays back to our leases. We spoke to the length of them at this day and age. We don't know what's going to happen in 5 years, let alone 50 years. So, I'm good with it. I think you guys have done a really good job.
Thank you.
So 90% achievable. We've made significant progress to getting to that target already with our switch to green energy. That's gotten us, we've made considerable progress there. What about that next jump to get to 90% by 2030?
Thank you. So the majority of the emissions in our 2019 inventory is from building electricity. There's also natural gas, but the large part of that inventory was for the building electricity use, and that was based on the PSE, which is the majority of our electrical provider. Their blend of sources of electrons includes about a 23% coal factor. So that means the emissions factors for those kilowatt hours are fairly large. And by going to Green Direct, the commitment that we made in 2018, that started in 2021, so after the 2019 inventory was made, those electrons, sorry, I'm not the electrical engineer, but that emission factor goes to zero because all of that electricity comes from solar and wind power. So you take the coal out of the mix, you bring down the emissions with each kilowatt hour to officially zero. There's wiggle room around that, but yes, the math says zero. So that actually brings our emissions down significantly by about 86% from 2019. So that extra 4% is what we'd be looking at going ahead to 2030. So perhaps there's an opportunity to include more clarity around that in our work as we look at the greenhouse gas inventory and as we are meeting our targets, and have a parallel goal for electricity use as well as have a parallel goal for greenhouse gas emissions as well. But I hear you, it's a large number. I will say that it's good to have a number that you're working towards, that you're not necessarily, it's not a binding number, which is the case with this climate action strategy. But I think we have to have something to work towards, and we felt that that was a reasonable and realistic target number.
And are those target numbers consistent with what our municipal partners are looking to achieve as well?
Yep.
Well, it's just, I've always found it's human nature that if you set your goal just a little bit lower and you pass that goal, everybody's a whole lot happier than if you set that goal and you miss it by a little bit and everybody's a little less happier. And I found that out with a crew when you're trying to fill a boat up with fish. What are we gonna do to get capped? I don't know, we might get halfway. When you go to the tender and it's full, they're pretty darn happy. Same thing with people with numbers, you know. We set the number at 75 and we get to 90. Everybody's jumping up and down and doing backflips at how great everything went. You know, it's just sometimes in this world we live in, we need a little bit more happiness than we do, oh, shoot, we didn't make it again. Just saying. That's all I got.
All right. Commissioner Bell.
And thank you. It's actually kind of fun to watch Kurt's eyes as I talk about this, because we've had these discussions over a beer one night. So that's, welcome to my party. So the first thing I did was I wanted to make sure that we were all inclusive, and I think we've had a discussion about this. There are some technologies in here that are emerging that aren't represented in our resolution. I want to make sure that we've got an all-encompassing, so the first request is, and thank you for doing this, is I'm going to, in one of the whereases, the one that starts whereas renewable energy is defined as energy derived from hydrogen. At the end of that, I just want to make sure that we include other emerging technologies, and you were kind enough to add that to the mix. We've got small-scale nuclear power plants coming online. We've got some hydrogen power coming online, as Don will attest to. So we've got other emerging sources of energy that I want to make sure that we include. That seemed to be just a list, but I want to make sure that we open it up to whatever may be coming down the road, so that we're open to whatever may happen.
We changed the whereas?
Whereas renewable energy is defined as energy derived from hydrogen. At the end of that, we just need to add in other emerging technologies. So I just want to make sure that that's on the table. The second one's a little more difficult, and it's with any strategy that we've got, there's cost involved. And again, we've had this discussion, so I'm not surprising Brian or Adrian with it. But one of the things that concerns me the most is the movement too fast into some things. And we heard at our Business Commerce Committee yesterday, the impact of a measure, again, not related to the port, but an impact by the state on buildings that are being forced to retrofit or new construction codes that are coming down for large-scale buildings. And on a warehouse over 50,000 square feet, the retrofit or the new construction to make it compliant with the new state regs is going to be incredibly costly. One of the developers in the room stated that a typical warehouse that he could build for $250,000 this year is going to cost him $750,000 to build if he's compliant with the 2028 mandates that the state is coming down with. So when you look at the unintended consequences of moving too fast on some things and forcing mandates and timelines, what you get a economic impact that's going to displace some people. The rent on a $250,000 building is very different from the rent on a $750,000 building. That will have an impact on the port because we're going to be subject to those same mandates. I think Adrian discussed the airport, for example. It's going to be one of those that is going to have to be retrofitted by 2028, which is going to create an increase in cost to the structure in Bellingham and will have an impact on the rate that ratepayers pay. It's going to have an impact on the warehouses that we have. And all of those retrofits are going to cost a ton of money, and it may displace some of our tenants that are in relatively low leases at the moment. I mean, I can think of Fairhaven when we've got, just don't go off on me when I say this, we've got Seaview down there in a big warehouse, right? You retrofit that, he's known for not wanting to pay more than he has to. And I know you don't care, but at some level, when you retrofit that building, you're going to displace some tenants that can't afford the increase in the infrastructure that's going to be required or the increase in rent that's going to be required of us to pay for that. And these mandates are coming down from the state. So as we look at any action plan, whether it be climate, transportation, or whatever, I just want to be mindful that the cost is not is not just a matter of we can pass it on because we can't. And that's a big concern. So that discussion is one I think we need to have around what's happening at the state. And just first of all, your feedback on that, because I'm curious how we're going to mitigate those costs as they come at us for especially those mandates that are coming from the state at 20, and they are climate related. So that's the only reason it's coming up here.
Yeah, so the Clean Buildings Act set out the Clean Buildings Performance Standards. And so we set up, I mentioned the Building and Infrastructure Energy Management Program. I can't even say it, the BUMP. And so we've been working with the utilities, other agencies in the same boat, no pun intended, looking at other airports as well, and really taking advantage of the programs that PSC and the state are setting up to help with that. So as we're not setting that code, we're not setting those requirements, but we're doing what we can to assess where we're at right now. We're benchmarking all of our buildings through that BUMP program. And also supporting our tenants where we can with that as well. So we're not going to be able to answer that with this strategy, but having a strategy in place helps us develop the tools to do that, I believe. So.
Yeah, I just know at some point the taxpayer is going to have to subsidize, or we're going to have to, the public sector or the public trough is going to be where we're going to get the funds to mitigate some of those increased costs. Otherwise, the private sector just can't absorb them. And I would say the same thing on energy costs. When you, on number 2, where you say the likelihood of increased energy costs, if we continue with fossil fuels, energy is cheap. So actually the plan does create an increase in energy costs, and the electric infrastructure isn't there yet. So some of the stuff that we're doing is way ahead of our headlights. And
fall under the cart's.
I like the headlights thing better because it's dark, and the headlights and the crash.
Yeah.
Well, this is the problem with today's government. Everybody wants to get.
I knew that would spin him up.
And the outfall of the decisions made. I mean, a very good one is what went on here in the city of Bellingham with this electrification process. You know, you see people sitting at the table
Mike.
telling you, we don't have the power or the infrastructure to do what you want to do, and they go ahead and do it anyway. I don't know if it's common sense is gone or what's gone. But people that are writing this stuff up and handing it down, obviously it's not gonna affect too much. Because they just go out the door and leave it for everybody else for us to fix. They pass a law and it's not the right thing to do. We all know we need to live cleaner, we need to do a better job of taking care of the earth. But you certainly can't do it by putting people out of business and running our tenants out of their businesses. The gentleman that spoke to us not having any founders in this country. Why? Because the environmental community came down so hard and so fast, there was no time for those companies to keep up with what they had to be at this certain date. So it was easier for them to leave and go to another country. And we're right back with the same thing. I mean, we didn't learn from that, I guess, and we're right back to the same thing we're at now. And only this is monetary to people. It's going to put people out of business. It's going to create hardships for our communities. But it's easy to drop the gavel and say, oh, it's the right thing to do, and pass it. And it's really not the right thing to do. The right thing to do is to figure it out and work together and make sure that we don't have too much collateral damage. You know, I can say this really isn't worth anything if they're going to do what they're doing in Olympia and pass those kind of laws that supersedes anything we're trying to do. It does. It just says, you got to do this. So the time that was spent on this is kind of a slap in the face when they do something like that, unfortunately. And you people work hard on things, and then you got somebody that comes along and thinks they got a better idea. Boom, got more power, drop the gavel, and your stuff's like, okay, what do we do with this? So I could really get going on this whole program.
You already
It
did.
really upsets me to no end.
Yeah, and really, I think I mentioned that I've been spending a couple of days on this, and what I'd like to see is that, and I've messed with this for a little bit, is understanding that the implementation could create a financial hardship for port tenants and local businesses, and that we create an environment to have that discussion in an open and honest way and come to solutions. So when we go through this, I'd love to have another provision in the resolution that recognizes that we're aware of the financial hardship that may be created by some of this. Again, we've already talked about the long-term financial harm. But the short term is what I'm worried about. We all have the same goal. We want to make sure that long-term impact doesn't kill us, right? So we want to make sure that we get there. But we need to make sure we do it in a way that's reasonable, rational, and has a decent outcome, and not the headlights and going out on a rapid road. So you can say anything you want.
Go for it.
Thanks, Commissioners. Brian Gowan, Director of Environmental Planning. So I think this is we've had a side discussion on this. I think this is a really great comment or series of comments. And, I think from as you mentioned, the climate action strategy that we're proposing adopting, this discussion doesn't really impact the resolution or the strategy directly. But I think what Adrian had mentioned, which I would agree with, is that this plan allows us to engage on all those issues directly. And the fact that this is a guidance document for the commission, and it's a living document that'll be updated annually, that we can bring all these discussions into the strategy as we update it, as we learn more, as we go down to Olympia, as we work on all these topics. And I think this just empowers staff and the commission to engage on all these topics a little bit more directly. So we definitely are hearing this, and we can take this back, and I don't think it impacts the resolution or the strategy right today, but it's something that it's an ongoing set of work that we'll be engaged with you on all these topics. So
none of this is, in my world, is not the strategy itself. I mean, the document is amazing.
Yeah,
but I do want to put something in the resolution that does acknowledge that. so when I started this out, I'm looking for the ending line from you. If you could help me with that. Where I do say implementation could create a financial hardship for port tenants and local businesses. I haven't been able to finish that, but what is the mechanism that we're going to use now that we've recognized that there is going to be that impact? What are we doing as a port to have that discussion? Right? It's more than just.
Yeah.
It's interesting, you know, from my perspective, we're also seeing those same economic impacts that are because of lack of action on climate change. You know, insurers are charging more money and in some places not providing insurance in some markets at all because the risks are too high for them. They've borne too many wildfires after storms. And so, yes, the government is providing regulation and policy that is impacting costs, clearly. But we also see that from the private sector coming in the form of higher insurance costs and then loss of productivity when we have seasons where we can't grow crops well, we have wildfires that destroy harvest and other factors that ruin fishing catch or whatever it is. And so we're already being burdened by increased costs, and I think those are going to increase without sufficient action. And so I think both are true.
There may be a kind of a if you really are looking for something to add to the resolution similar to that last, whereas, you know, where you can acknowledge, and I'd have to review the resolution, but you could add something just to acknowledging that there is increased cost related to climate change, and that way it's not saying that, to Commissioner Shepherd's point, I think crosses all those boundaries. You know, it's just acknowledging that it is an impact.
So this resolution says that.
Okay, yeah.
In no uncertain.
Okay, great.
It's very clear. But some of our reaction to that is really what I'm more worried about.
Got it.
I'm more worried that if they didn't put that 2029 deadline on that, those buildings could have been retrofitted over a greater period of time. It's really too rapid. And I'm just afraid that if we start down this road, that we're going to do something similar. Right? And I don't think the electric infrastructure is there. And we've seen, you know, loss by the people who own it and stuff. Can you turn it back on?
Just leave guys.
Yeah, you own an electric car and you,
It has its drawbacks and it has its pluses. I mean, the problem is everybody's in a super hurry. Okay, we didn't do anything for a long time. We all recognize that. And now all of a sudden, everybody thinks we can do this stuff overnight. You can't. You know, we run our factories out of this country by putting those deadlines that we're speaking to. So that it was so cost inhibitive to try and fix it, they couldn't. And now we're talking about doing the same thing in 2029, but you have to have these buildings retrofitted. We're gonna shut them down. You're gonna have a bunch of vacant buildings sitting around because nobody can afford to fix them or nobody can afford.
and I want to be clear, there's nothing in this plan that even approaches that. So I want to separate what's happening at the state level from this. But I just want to also acknowledge that there may be some actions that we take down the road that will have a financial impact, and we should have that discussion to acknowledge what that would be, both sides,
Maybe the
long-term
police
and
across the
short-term.
state need to go on the offense instead of the defense for our tenants. And go to Olympia and start pounding on the desk and saying, hey, how do you expect the state's gonna pay for these changes? Because you're not gonna get a tax base by doing this. Your tax base is gonna go away. I mean, somebody's not thinking very clearly down there, and I got an idea who the guy is.
So to stay on task, really what I've got is implementation could create financial hardships in port tenants and local businesses. But what I want to do is finish that off with something that we can say we're going to do to address that. So whereas that, then the next part of that, I mean, that's its own whereas. And then in the next section down is let's have that commissioner, that committee.
Something along the lines that we're
Yeah, something along the lines of the port will work to help offset the costs to our own operations and to our tenant operations.
I just care that we have that discussion, right? I just care that we sit down and we have this, like Michael and I would.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what, you know, hopefully some of these climate commitment act dollars are for. You know, the state is running auctions on the price of carbon. These auctions are bringing in more money than anticipated, and we should really be demanding that that money is coming back to our communities to make sure that we're not running businesses out of town and that we're investing that money into our communities so that they're more resilient and are able to mitigate these impacts.
You mean instead of going into the general fund and disappearing?
Exactly. It should not go into the disappearing fund. And it should be targeted dollars.
Yeah, so I think the way Adrian had mentioned, I think one way to wrap that up would be and continue to work, look for opportunities to mitigate any of those financial burdens, and that could include pursuing grants, other things like that, but keeping it broad so that gives the flexibility for port staff. Again, same thing with the emerging technologies ideas, that we don't know what those opportunities are. Those could be grants, they could be incentives by the utilities, whatever it is. We'll continue to work on those, which we do talk about in our strategy. But to throw that into the resolution, if it's not already, that'd be an easy add to say, and we'll look for opportunities to offset any financial impacts as appropriate.
And quite frankly, I'm more worried about the unintended consequences, right? And that's what we're not looking at, and I want to make sure that we do address those.
Well, it's obvious on
So-
this, we have to be a shield for our tenants because, our other people, so to speak, aren't paying much attention to the unintended, if they're unintended consequences.
Yeah, and so I would finish it off with, and the port will address unintended consequences. Maybe that's what I was looking to. If I add that whereas to this resolution, would you?
That's,
Go ahead. No,
I
you're
seem
here
a
to
little
talk.
omnipotent, I will say. But maybe instead of address unintended consequences, work to offset them or.
We have to be
See, but
careful how we word it. We're just gonna say we're gonna take care of it.
We don't want to.
Yeah.
We don't want to.
We don't wanna
put
do
ourselves
that.
on the hook.
No,
for this.
exactly, and that's why
What do you mean by omnipotent? I mean,
well, it just makes us sound like we can predict them. We
can't.
Exactly.
unintended consequences, yeah.
Exactly. So,
But address them somehow. I mean,
right.
like, we
address-
don't always know them beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interest is wanting to make sure that our tenants are able to continue doing the work that they do, help us fulfill our mission. Our tenants, we're here for economic development, and we want our tenants to be able to continue being partners in achieving that goal. And so some wording there where we're able to continue supporting our tenants' ability to foster economic development in our community.
That was perfect.
You guys let me know what you think. Implementation could create a financial hardship for port tenants and local businesses. The port will create strategies to address unintended consequences or something like that. Is that not as omnipotent?
Yes.
I'm taking off my deity hat.
Thank you. That sounds, yeah, great.
Does that work?
Yeah, and of course, this is at the discretion of the commission. This is your
Yeah, I'm not asking-
resolution.
I'm
So
not asking you.
yeah, I mean, I think that language seems like it would work with
fine. I'm
what's
fine with
intended,
that.
and
I'm
it's
fine with anything that'll put some kind of shield up that our tenants know that will hold for them to stop the unintended consequences. I mean,
So let me read that again.
we gotta give them some kind of insurance so people feel that they have some stability here.
And I'll write this in a way you can actually read it.
Oh, not chicken scratch?
Implementation could create a financial hardship for port tenants and local businesses, and the port will create strategies to address unintended consequences. That's the best I could
Rob
do.
hasn't chimed in on this. We haven't.
Rob, hey, Rob.
Yes, you guys are having a great discussion. Just keep it up. I mean, I'm in total agreement. I think our tenants are going to have some problems here. We're going to try and help them to the extent we can. But the carbon tax is the solution here. That's where the money is that will allow us to help our tenants. So to the extent you can work that into your language, I think that would be good.
That's a non sequitur.
So should we vote on this or?
I mean, I think that the options would be we could table this one, pull it from the agenda, and rewrite the resolution with that wording and get it right. I mean, however you want it. I think the recommended language you just read would work as well. It's just a commitment to work on addressing any unintended consequences, which we don't know right now. So, I mean, that's okay. It's kind of, and again, this resolution is a references that the climate action strategy is a guidance document anyway. So this is to guide decisions as we move forward. I don't think anything in here is binding enough to do anything something specific. So I think that language works. It addresses your concern. Otherwise, though, we could pull it, work it and put something else out there.
I think we can vote on this today and include that additional language.
And that language can be amended at any time.
Yeah.
Who would be crazy enough to want to pull it?
We're not pulling it.
Whose idea was that?
Adrian, did you have any other questions, Commissioner Bill?
Go ahead, I may, when you're done.
So, Adrian, I wanted to talk a little bit about the question about port tenant emissions. It's come up a couple times. I know there was public comment on that. What is our capacity to understand tenant contributions to greenhouse gas emissions and our ability to work with them to reduce? It's not the same as the meters we control and pay and understand. Do we even have an ability to look into our tenants' meters to really adequately understand these contributions that they're creating?
It depends. My favorite answer. But for the most part, we actually do receive the utility bills for a lot of our tenants, and we rebill them to the tenants. So we directly have the information. And through the BUMP, the Building and Infrastructure Energy Management Program I've been talking about, we have been asking for more information from those that we don't get the bills for directly. So there is a process where you have permission to access their information. So we can get that data. As far as pushing something onto them, as far as energy efficiency or reduction in their use or changing what they're doing, we don't have that control. That would be something way beyond me. It would be into the leases or something else. But I think as we start to reach out to more and more tenants about this, we are hearing that people are interested in it. There are energy efficiency programs out there. The CSIM that you signed in the consent agenda today is one of those. So there are ways to financially benefit folks in addition to reducing their energy bills. And so we do have the data from their emissions based on their utility usage. Fleet fuel might be a totally different story. So getting a full picture might require a lot more engagement with the tenants, but it's not impossible.
And do you expect
Commissioners, if I can jump in here, one of the things we're struggling with as we roll out solar panels, and those solar panels generate electricity that benefits our tenants, how do we capture that benefit or get reimbursed for that benefit? And we're exploring that. I think it's going to end up being reopening some leases. I don't think that's going to be that complicated, because if we go to our tenants and say, we want to install these solar on your roof and you're going to pay us now instead of Puget Sound Energy for your electricity, and we work that out, I think they'll be amenable to that. And I think we'll be able to renegotiate their leases. But right now, that's not in our leases. We're going to have to negotiate that into future leases and renegotiate it into as we renew existing leases.
So do you expect in future iterations of this work, we will be understanding those tenant contributions?
I think so. It's a question of how complete that will be and how, how much pushing we want to do. At this rate, we don't want to do that. We just want to look at the data that we have. But yeah, I don't think it's impossible going forward.
Well, I think it's useful to do because it allows us to have a fuller understanding of the port lands and what they produce. And then it provides us a mechanism to gear up for how are we going to incentivize, what resources, how can we help find grants, and how can we work with the state to bring in dollars for making those buildings more efficient and helping those tenants to get their emissions down.
Okay. We could definitely look at, we're just finishing up the 2022 greenhouse gas inventory right now. But as we look ahead and are starting to look back at the 2023 data, we can start to include tenant data in that.
I would like to see that, and I don't want to, we don't have an enforcement mechanism here, and I'm not interested in us being a cop on the street on this, but I do think it's important for us to understand so we're able to work and help incentivize. One of our public comments was on trees. How do things like trees or aquaculture or other carbon sequestration from the sea initiatives fit into a project like this?
We've actually been starting a Trees for Resilience program, and if you want more information than that, I can call other staff up on that. But yes, it's definitely something that we're considering because we do see opportunities for more trees around the port. Of course, we have things like fill, and whether trees will grow there or not is another question. But yeah, we're definitely looking at that and thinking about what an inventory of our tree canopy cover would look like, as well as keeping an eye on what the city is doing with their urban canopy plan, which is out for comment right now. We are looking at how to support and attract tenants who might be doing more carbon sequestration. So we do have some folks that we're having conversations with right now about whether or not that would be an appropriate space for them. So yeah, we're definitely up for those conversations. It's another "it depends" answer, I think, but definitely considering those.
Do you think programs like having a carbon action plan make it ever attractive for us to purchase property that we are going to reforest or make into a forested, a managed planting of trees to help us reduce or offset some of our emissions? Does that ever become financially feasible?
I think joining with some of the folks that we collaborate with within the region, so the city, the county, the tribes, whether it's WTA or the Council of Governments, other folks that we're working with at a staff level, that's definitely a conversation we can have about how we could realize some of the benefit and also contribute to those types of projects.
I mean, at some point there is a ability to monetize through carbon credits. You know, these carbon credits exist because people have to buy them, and there is money to be made now and increasingly in the future with being able to sell those carbon credits for renewable energy initiatives or other factors that are mitigating gas emissions. So, something interesting to think about. I think my last question is, I feel like our port, and I think you mentioned this briefly, is taking some leadership here on a state level and maybe out a larger level. Do we know how many of the 75 ports in Washington have climate action strategies?
I do not have that information off the top of my head, but I can get it for you. It's definitely been updated since we first started this work, and there was only a handful then, but it's been 4 or 5 years. So.
Okay. Yeah, that was my understanding. Is there was less than, somewhere around 5 when we started this work, and there may be a few more at this point, but I think we are still demonstrating some leadership statewide. And while on the topic of leadership, I just wanted to give a shout out to our executive director, Rob, for helping manage this project. This has involved every division at the port has collaborated to provide input and to be part of the implementation and developing of this strategy. And that's a big kudos to everybody involved across the divisions of the port, and certainly to Rob's work in managing staff and our strategic initiatives. So good work and thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shepherd. Appreciate that. On this one, though, the credit has to go to the staff. If anything, I'm kind of the roadblock on this one, saying how much is this going to cost? How's this going to affect our tenants? So I'm the guy on this one that's slowing things down, but the staff is really taking this to heart. They're pushing it forward and they're doing great work. So thank you for acknowledging that.
Thank you, Rob.
Any other questions or comments?
I have one question. So you spoke earlier that the port is 100% renewable or sustainable energy we're using, correct?
The electricity that
Electricity
we're
part,
using
yes,
from
electricity.
PSE for port-controlled meters, yes.
That's what I was gonna ask. Is that for all of our property and tenants, or is that just for, as you spoke to, we don't get power bills from some folks, and those folks could be doing something different?
That is correct.
So really, we're not 100% on all of our port property.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Like for the airport is a port meter. We understand that, we pay that, that's part of our Green Direct program. A tenant like BCS, they buy their power outside of PSC, I believe, and so they are their own, have their own billing.
That's right.
That would be
Yeah.
separate.
We don't include their purchases in our emissions.
That's just, I wanted some clarity. I didn't realize, I didn't understand whether it was everybody.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, just like to acknowledge that if you look at the makeup of this port, you would not expect this outcome, but it will be a unanimous vote today. Thank you.
You guys ready for the motion?
You don't know what I'm
Are
going to
you ready for this?
I haven't said that.
Well, since we changed the resolution, I don't know if I should read it before you vote on that,
The
or
one section.
Just read the section that we've changed.
that we added?
Yeah.
Okay. So, a motion to approve Resolution 1409 with the added language to the end of paragraph 7, and other emerging technologies, and then add paragraph 12, whereas in implementation could create financial hardship for port tenants and local businesses. The port will create strategies to address and mitigate unintended consequences. Okay.
Okay. Commissioner Bell.
I do best when I'm under pressure, so all weekend long I could have thought about this and wouldn't come up with that word language. Yes.
Commissioner Briscoe.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Everyone's surprised. Thank you all.
So who was online that wanted the unanimous vote?
That was Andrew.
Andrew,
Mr. Shelton.
you got it.
It was me. I'm going to take full credit for the unanimous vote. Let it be known.
You put a lot of pressure on us, man.
Yeah.
That's what I do, baby.
Thanks for the support.
Thank you, all of you. Seriously.
All right. Well, that's the end of our regular scheduled business. We open up a second opportunity for public comment. Anyone in the room wish to provide public comment? Yes. A repeat.
So the port's main goal here is to make money, right? Basically.
The port's mission is economic development.
That's
Our main
nicer
goal
way.
is to put people to work.
Yeah.
To let people
Okay.
like you make money.
Put people to work. We talk about emissions, right? Well, I think
Can you state your name again and where you live?
Tyson King, just down the road here. Marine Drive. Anyway,
In your car or what?
sometimes. So a few months ago, we seen a balloon come over from China, right? So there's proof. Whatever happens there makes it here. It sounds great. We want to do solar. We want to do wind. That's made in China, a lot of it. And they don't care. They're just puking out emissions or puking everything out. Is there any chance that the port could go after someone to make it here? Make the wind turbines here. That way we can control it. We can make sure it is low emissions. It is putting citizens to work. It is putting more money into, say, Medicare and Social Security for certain members of our community. So that makes everybody happy.
How come he looked at me when he said that?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question, Mr. King. And, you know, we do have what I think is a really growing hub for clean tech providers and manufacturers here. We have one of the world's largest solar panel manufacturing companies produces solar panels on our waterfront, Silfab. They've been here for at least 10 years now producing solar panels. We recently welcomed a Norwegian company called Corvus Marine. They're making marine electric batteries to hybridize and power large marine vessels. They are located in Fairhaven. They're going to be doing manufacturing at that facility. And then we just welcomed another Canadian company, Vicinity Motors, to Ferndale. They're going to ramp up to 300 people employment at a manufacturing facility that they just opened that is building fully electric light and medium duty trucks and city buses. And so we are seeing that, and part of it is because our government requires things like a city bus to be made in the US if a municipality is going to buy it. And it's a priority for me when we are investing in sustainability, like solar panels, that we are trying to close the loop as much as possible, buy those that are made here, and so we're seeing our dollars returned where we live.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good comment. Thank you. Anyone else? Anybody on Zoom?
Yeah, could I chip something in?
Another repeat, yes.
Yeah, Commissioners Ballard.
Just remind us who you are and.
Oh, Andrew Shelton, South Hill. I'm a retired fisher. The public is clamoring for action on climate change. So our job is to provide you cover with BCS. I know you're worried about this lift with businesses that are going to be under stress, but there are, like I said, there's state fixes. I mean, our job is to support the commission, and your job is to go and have the chat with those people about how, for example, like I said, they lost hundreds of millions of dollars in lost income when the Bering Sea fleet got shut down. There's Commissioner Briscoe, your comment about, oh, we waited too long and now we have to act fast, but it's going to be hard. It's like, it's there's going to be hardship, and we're all going to have to change our way of doing things to solve the largest problem that Indiana has ever faced. So just understand that there will be a groundswell of support, but your jobs will be to start fucking changing hearts and minds, excuse my French, to save the other fisheries that we do have left. We got to start looking at the big picture and helping those tenants see that we're with you. We build solar panels next door to the port, but like I said, it's time to start kicking some serious ass on this. But it will require everyone to just, we have got your back, but it's time for some hard conversations about how we're gonna get this done. So thank you again for your vote, and I'm just looking forward to seeing how it flushes out.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Anyone else on Zoom? Seeing none, we will move into other business. Commissioner Bell?
Yeah, my only hot button is to have a discussion with the general population and my friends over here at the ILWU, and maybe even you, Andrew. We're trying to make sure that we keep our shipping terminal. You just mentioned you were on South Hill. The South Hill Neighborhood Association meeting is September 27th at 7 p.m. And we're staring down the rifle of a gun that's about to, with the city and the city council, change the way business is done on our industrial ground. And we just need all the labor support, all of the community support. It is primarily the South Hill neighborhood that is driving this without recognizing the benefit and the jobs that are being created on that property. And quite frankly, I'm just unapologetic at the moment because work is not always quiet. And quite frankly, that's what that shipping terminal was intended to be used for. So I'm just asking for some support. We tend to not go to those meetings because we think it'll take care of itself. But having been in this situation before, I have seen where hyperbole dominates the day and exaggeration dominates the day, and lies tend to travel around the globe before the truth even gets out of bed. So I just want to make sure that we're there to correct the record with as many people as we can. So September 27th at 7 p.m. South Hill neighborhood. I would appreciate a good showing there from the people who do support the activities that we are doing on the port, both here and in the public, because we are doing a service, and we are working our butts off to try to mitigate any impacts from that to not only the neighboring area, but also to the port itself. It is a good business. It is a solid business. It's going to be here for a long time with a good company. Riley Sweeney aside, he's not here, so I can slam him. But I am putting that request out that let's get active, because if we don't, we're going to lose our industrial ground, and we're going to lose the ability to do work on our industrial ground if the city does what it is threatening to do. We can't respond to anything now because the city doesn't have anything on the docket, but the rumor mill is very loud and very clear that the city would like to restrict hours, which means less work. The city would like to put noise ordinances in, which means no backup beacons. Things like that, which we have to thwart.
So I suppose that's
I'm not here to argue that.
goose is good for the gander.
Don't argue with me. I'm just the messenger. So I'm just asking that we make our presence known in all those locations whenever you see something like that. Or if you see something that's being misstated, please correct the record.
So the meeting, is that the South Hill meeting itself?
That's the South Hill Neighborhood Association meeting. At our last commission meeting, Joe made an offer to work with us to host a forum where we were able to increase dialogue, provide more factual information. I know Rob has been looking into that. Have we made any progress in getting a forum put together where we're able to be present, have some of our union partners and people like Riley or other representatives from ABC, so we're able to get as much factual information out as possible. Anytime there's uncertainty and unknowns, people go to fear. And I think when we provide accurate and factual information, people come out realizing that this is, by and large, a good news story. And we've got to just clearly communicate that. Do you have any update for us, Rob?
Commissioners, I've texted with the mayor about this today. We're trying to set up a meeting where we have ABC, the longshoremen, the city, and the port, and a few members of the South Hills in the same room. We haven't gotten that date narrowed down yet, but I just did text with him, and then I missed a call from him at 4 o'clock when this meeting started. So we're very much trying to get that done, and I suspect we will in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Good. Well, keep moving on that. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. Anything else, Commissioner Bell? No. Commissioner Briscoe? No, I have nothing. All right. I just have a couple things to check through. One, I already mentioned the Vicinity Motors, but I wanted to give a shout out to Dawn, Gina, and the rest of our economic development team for their hard work to bring Vicinity Motors to Ferndale and to Whatcom County. The governor came for the ribbon cutting. It was a really nice event, and it is a lovely factory that they've put together. I got to drive one of the trucks. It was quite fun, and it's really exciting. I think we are continuing to grow that clean tech manufacturing hub, and I appreciate all the work that went into that. So thank you both.
Commissioner Envy, you've now taken a trip that I didn't get to take. You've driven a bus that I haven't been able to drive.
I know.
Speaking of
Interesting.
electric
You got to go to
buses
Las
and
Vegas,
stuff,
though.
Did we ever
was-
get our trucks?
Our Fords?
Yeah.
No, we're still in the back order list for the trucks.
Okay.
Okay, well, we'll have to look for those.
So how was the bus drive?
Yeah. How was the bus drive?
You need to elaborate just a little.
Well, I drove so they have 3 models of their truck. One has like a dump on it, one has it's like a box truck, and one is a flatbed. And, you know, I'm used to driving trucks when you step on, you step on the accelerator, there's a little bit of a lag time, but it's electric, and so it just all of a sudden takes off. The governor drove one around, and then I got to drive one around. A couple other people drove them around. It was quite fun. And it really had a lot of power and a lot of pickup, good range, and they're putting them together right here in
Those
Ferndale.
are commercial rigs.
Yeah. Yeah. The buses are they're smaller than a city bus, like the biggest WTA. They're more of the size of like the paratransit buses, kind of in between paratransit and a regular city bus. So they're a little smaller than a large city bus, but there's lots of applications for them. Good range and really nice looking product. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. A couple others. Let's see here. I've been getting a lot of questions on the future of the pump track and the container village. And I just want to say that mostly it's credit to us for putting in a fantastic, well-loved installation. The community clearly has adopted it, spends time there. It's a draw from people from out of town, and people feel a lot of now ownership about these public amenities. People really love them, and that's a big credit to our team for putting in great facilities. It's, I think, because people are seeing development occurring around with the Millworks project, the board mill coming online, the other development, they're asking questions. What's going to happen? Are these things going to stick around? And so I have talked with Rob about how we can increase some just information about what the future is. Most people, when I say we're signing 10-year leases in the Portal Village and the pump track is built on future city park, they say, oh, okay, that's enough for me. But that messaging is not quite going out. So I think staff has some ideas about some signage down at the pump track and at the container village that will start communicating some of that. And so we're able to just hopefully alleviate some fears. But
What would that say? It's here to stay. If you don't like it, go away.
it's here to stay. That's the message. And that we want people to keep using it and keep enjoying it.
We also have a few QR codes down there, and it might not be a bad idea once, I'm assuming Mike and Rob are going to put together the message, to put it on that website, because you want to learn more about the Portal Container
Definitely.
Village, click here, and then it brings them right to the site.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah, commissioners, we've talked about doing the QR codes. We have some deadlines coming up on some property decisions here in October. So one of the things we're kind of lay low until that date hits so we don't get on our own way here. So we're being very careful there, working with legal. But Mike and I have talked about a social media blitz to talk about the portal and the pump track being around for a long time.
Great. Okay. And then my last thing is just speaking of the pump track, I think we should consider the option of the pump track was built on what's planned to be permanent parkland. The plan has always been that the city would take on ownership and development of that site. And I think we should consider that we as the port take over the management and build out of that facility. We've already invested in it. We're already put forth a great product that people are enjoying. And when I have to tell people that, yes, it's built on public land, and eventually the city will take ownership and do something with it, but they don't have a budget or a plan or know what they're going to do yet, it leaves people with some questions. And I think we should start some conversation about, is there an opportunity there for us to take over management? We do a great job with our other park facilities, and I don't see any reason we couldn't do a great job with this one as well.
Want to vote on it now or what?
I'm just going to put that out there as some interest and let Brian and Rob and the team think
Sure
about
don't want to vote on it.
I think Bobby's ready to go. I knew this would be one of those ones that he'd jump for. Yeah.
Commissioners, I just want to caution us that we have existing agreements with the city that we need to be very careful about. It doesn't mean they can't be changed, but we do have agreements that say when certain square footages get built out, we give land to the city, they turn them into parks. Those are going to have to be renegotiated, and certainly we can do that, but there's got to be a very much a process to it. Even though we don't like process, there will have to be a process here.
Yeah. And we want to make sure that the city is, positioning their contributions for, if they're going to put in less contribution to parks, that they maybe speed up development of the Bayview Connector or something else.
Or they could put some money into the GP Wharf for public use.
GP Wharf. There's
thought I'd throw that
there's
out there.
lots of great public amenities we want to see built out for people to enjoy. Great idea.
Sound wall for South Hill.
Well, that's all for me. Anybody else? Any other items? Go ahead.
Mike, you had an update for ABC. Did you want
Okay. Thank you, Commissioners. Michael Hogan, Public Affairs Administrator. Yeah, we just wanted to give a quick update. The MV Autumn Sea, if you look out in Bellingham Bay, arrived a couple days ago, and it'll be docking at our shipping terminal tomorrow. And we just wanted to let folks know, what it is, where it's going, why it's here, and just to give a brief update on ABC and how many jobs are being created, our efforts to be a good neighbor, and how that fits in with our vibrant working waterfront. So the ship will tie up to the shipping terminal tomorrow. It'll be there for about 10 days. The longshoremen will load 27,500 tons of recycled steel and metal, and from Washington and Canada. And next stop is going to be Haldia, India, in the Bay of Bengal. So that's about a 35-day journey where the steel will get remelted and reused. And as we just adopted our climate action strategy, I'll say that steel is 100% recyclable, and each year recycling steel rather than mining the iron ore saves enough energy to supply the annual needs of more than 18 million homes. So it's a really important process for carbon reduction and our climate strategies in general. And that's the third cargo ship at the shipping terminal this year. So as Riley mentioned earlier, 60 ILWU workers will load the Autumn Sea. Some of those folks are from out of town. They'll be staying in hotels, spending money at restaurants. You can see Joe eats a lot, so the longshoremen will be good patrons. It also creating jobs locally. ILWU Local 7 has registered 8 new longshore workers, bringing their total to 18, and 10 local ABC recycling employees will assist with the cargo loading. So good news on the creating jobs front. We understand that as we activate this bring the new activity online, the port always wants to be a good neighbor. What you're looking at here is a picture of the waterfront master plan. This was, took close to 10 years with thousands and thousands of public commenting. And as you can see, there are transition from that traditional heavy industrial property to an extension of downtown, but also really important for the community to maintain those marine trades and job creating areas, including the log pond and shipping terminal. And for folks that aren't familiar with the Waterfront Master Plan, I'd encourage them. You can go to www.portofbellingham.com/waterfront master plan and learn more about it. The shipping terminal and log pond were underutilized for many years as we worked to clean up the historic contamination that prevented that redevelopment. After we completed one of the largest cleanups in state history in 2016 with the Whatcom Waterway, it allowed us to start activating that space and investing in the infrastructure. And ABC was the first long-term tenant to sign, and there have been concerns and questions from the neighborhood as that formerly underutilized space became activated. And as you know, we are in conversation with those citizens and working to be a good neighbor. And so one of the things that people are wondering is how do we know when these ships are coming? If you go to portofbellingham.com/ship schedule, you can see what the berth schedule is, so when the ship is arriving, so you can see highlighted in yellow, the Autumn Sea doing recycled metal at the shipping terminal from September 20th to September 30th. And on our website, you can sign up for email or text notifications when that page gets updated. So trying to make it easy for folks to understand when ships are coming in and what they're doing. Obviously, we live in a very strong local, state, and regulatory framework, and so ABC and all our other tenants must comply with those regulations. The port also has its own environmental compliance assessment program, so being stewards of public property, we really want to make sure that the that our tenants are complying with those regulations and that we're preserving those properties for future use so that we don't run into problems of the past where they're contaminated and unusable and we can't create jobs with them. Some citizens have expressed concerns about dust and air quality, and the port's working with ABC to manage and monitor that dust. We've done voluntary monitoring. There's been no air quality concerns from that monitoring. We do use 2 water trucks during loading to reduce the dust. Noise is obviously new activity. Some people are extremely sensitive to noise, some people are not so much. Again, the port's done voluntary monitoring. We're in compliance with the noise ordinance. We have switched to quieter backup alarms on the heavy equipment in order to be a good neighbor. And as you can see in the picture below, created a sound barrier in the loading area. In conversations with the neighbors, they've asked to raise that barrier, and so we've done that for this time. So I think that just demonstrates that the port's interested in having a good dialogue with a respectful dialogue with our with people that are in that area, and as they experience this, we'll work with them to do what we can. Also, water quality, stormwater's huge importance in Puget Sound. There's required monitoring. The port holds an industrial stormwater general permit at the shipping terminal. We're in compliance with that permit. We use metal rumble strips and quarry spalls to clean the truck tires when they go in, a commercial vacuum sweeper during loading, filter treatments on the wharf. You can see in the picture above. And we continue to look at what investments we can make for best management practices and not have any environmental impacts to Puget Sound. ABC has proposed a metal shredding and recycling facility near Lehigh Concrete. That project's still under development. The permits have not been submitted. ABC does have a fact sheet at this website where folks that are watching online can go and get some information that they're putting out about it. And Riley Sweeney was here earlier. That's ABC's Recycling Community Relations Manager, and his contact information is here as well. So again, there's not a proposal. ABC is still working through that process, and here's some contact information for the right folks for people to talk to. And finally, how does this fit in with our working waterfront, our vibrant marine trades community? A 2017 study had 191,000 jobs in Washington created or supported by the marine trade sector. We know it's big in Washington. We also know it's really big in Whatcom County, where over 6,000 jobs are created or supported by marine trades, about 7% of our total workforce. As Elliot mentioned earlier, there's strong demand for among the marine trades community for port property. And at the shipping terminal in particular, we have significant potential to create more family wage jobs. So that's all we have, just a brief update. And the ship arrives tomorrow, and look forward to seeing those longshoremen out doing what they do and creating economic value for our community. So at any rate, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mike. You had one other item?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That was good. Yeah, I think, I don't know if it was last meeting or maybe before last, I asked a question about the WTA, if we could, I've had several people ask why we don't have bus service in the harbor anymore. Yeah. And I haven't heard anything back on that, and I was kind of wondering where we're at on that. Anybody tell me? Mike?
Thank you, Commissioner. I actually just talked to Les Reardons. He's head of the WTA, and he's working with his staff on the possibility of a bus service that would go every 15 minutes, kind of from Squalicum Harbor over to Fairhaven. So, at any rate, it's not in WTA's. They're nowhere near making any decisions on that, but. At least he asked me if I thought it'd be a good idea, and I said it'd be great, and easy connections to their other service. So those will be conversations that we'll continue to have with them, and especially as the waterfront develops, and it'd be a good option for folks to go from one side of our waterfront to the other in Bellingham.
Did you say every 15 minutes?
he thought every smaller buses every 15 minutes, and the reason that is because, you know, if it's every hour or two, it's less convenient. If it's the sort of hop on, hop off, they've seen among their other routes higher demand for that type of service. So it's reliable, regular. You don't really need to look at the schedule or anything. You just know that when you're in a certain zone, that bus is going to be coming along on a regular every 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, anything else?
You done?
All right, we are done.